Hi, I'm Anna with Ahlam Academy in Houston, Texas. In this video, I'm going to be talking about weighted hip lifts and weighted hip drops. I've been on break. You haven't received a few weeks of videos from me because it's been the holidays. I was on vacation, but I am back in the studio and recording new content for you. So expect a video every Wednesday from me like normal from here on out. First, I'll begin by breaking down the correct posturing for both movements, and then I'll talk in detail a little bit about each. Let's begin by getting into proper dance posture. Feet under the hip joints, knees soft, lower abs slightly engaged to elongate the lower back, and of course our arms out here to the side looking pretty. From that soft knee position, we're going to sink a little more deeply into the posture to create some extra room in the knees. Then what we're going to do is to softly extend the right knee, not extending it out fully, but just softly extending it, and you'll see that my right hip is going to rise up. Then I'm going to switch knees. I'm going to bend the right knee and then softly extend the left, and that's going to cause the left hip to rise up, to come up. So if I continue that movement of bending and softly extending the knee, that's going to cause my hips to continue to rise and fall. So this is the basic mechanics of the movement. Let's get into those details about the weighted hip lift. So again, from that proper posturing, you want to think about, when you're lifting, the extension, the soft extension of each knee. So here, as I softly extend on the right, you see the right hip rise up, and then as I bend, you see the extension of the left leg and the hip rising on the left. And I just continue that movement. But sometimes the difficulty in this move starts because you may feel like you want to shift. So the hip lift may turn into something that looks more like a hip bump. So one of the important details to keep in mind when you're executing the weighted hip lift is to remember what it's called. Remember the word weighted. You want to keep both feet weighted equally as you execute the hip lift. And what that will do is it will cause you to stay centered, okay? If you keep your weight even over both feet, it's going to cause the lift to stay centered, as if you are drawing the hip up right under your rib cage. Because if you shift, you'll notice that you will shift out from under your rib cage, okay? So it's so important to keep the weight centered over both feet so you don't have a shift in the hip, essentially turning it into a hip bump rather than keeping it as a hip lift that moves straight up and down. When you're doing this move, the effect is almost like pistons in an engine. They're moving straight up and down like this. So the easiest way to do that is to really maintain that center and maintain the weightedness over both feet equally as you bring up each hip, rather than shifting weight as you lift and turning it into that hip bump. One other thing that you could encounter as you lift is your rib cage may feel as if it wants to shift as you lift, but think about pulling up from the top of your head, maintaining that lifted feeling throughout your rib cage. So as you lift, you keep everything nice and centered, top to bottom, very controlled, very isolated, rather than having that shift in the upper body or that shift in the hip. Keep it very, very centered. So this was the hip lift, Now let's turn it upside down and talk about the weighted hip drops. So essentially, we're doing the same thing in the body mechanically, but we're doing the opposite, okay? So as we soften in the knees, what's gonna happen now is as one knee softly extends, the other one will sink into a greater bend. And so now the focus is on the bending of the knees rather than the extension of the knees. So here, as I bend, the hips will then drop. And again, we're maintaining that piston-like quality where the movement is straight up and down, keeping the hips and the ribs in alignment, maintaining the evenness of our weight. Again, it's easy to kind of shift the hip and shift the weight onto one side, but we want to keep it very centered. And again, you may have the feeling that you want to shift in the ribs, but don't let that happen. Keep everything up and lifted and in alignment, and then you're going to have a beautiful weighted hip drop. Next, I'm going to show you a side view and talk about a couple of tips that I think are important to maintaining the correct position as you do the weighted hip lifts and drops. So here, as I am performing the motion, okay, I'm being careful to keep low in my body. I'm not extending the legs and say hyperextending in the leg as I bend the other, doing something like this. That's not exactly what is happening in my body. I'm keeping both knees soft and just extending the other leg just a little bit to create the lift. One other point is to maintain the engagement in the lower abs. If I don't maintain that engagement, what's going to happen is my hips are going to tilt forward as I work, and that's going to cause some agitation in the lower back, which is never good. We want to keep those lower backs healthy as we dance. So be sure to engage those abs just a little bit so you're able to keep the body and the back nice and long. Another way that you can look at the weighted hip lift and hip drop is a contraction or an expansion of the sides of your torso that are alternating on each side. Let me break down a little bit. So here, as I'm doing a lift, okay, it is coming from your knees, definitely coming from the leg, but your torso is also assisting, okay? So as you lift, you can also imagine that side of your waist is contracting, like you're bringing the hip closer to the ribs on the right side and then on the left side. Right, left, okay? That's one way to look at the lifts. Another way to look at the drops is as an extension or an expansion of that side of your body instead of just a drop, okay? So here, as I drop each side, I can think about expanding, separating the hip and the ribs on the right and then on the left. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. Please subscribe, like, and share, and I will see you in the next video.